Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is Breaking Ish, and I am going over the January 6th final report. Couple of housekeeping matters. I have a co host. It's a big dog. It licks itself a lot, and you might hear that. So there's nothing I can do about that. I just wanted to let you know that. Second thing, I don't go over the ancillary materials and the transcripts that were released by the January 6th committee after it released its final report. I am just going over the report itself. And let me tell you, it's enough. And, it's interesting I say it's enough because information that news media is coming out and reporting on from other ancillary sources outside of the January 6th report and its transcripts, they are corroborating the same stories that the January 6th committee report told us. The January 6th committee just didn't tell us that story in excruciating and granular detail. And I believe that, and I've said this many times, it's because of the constraints on the committee as well as on the committee's core mission, which was to find out what happened on January 6th and who is responsible for it. But I'm reading just the information from the January 6th report. And every day I go back and check the news coming out that day, and news reports from various other sources tell the exact same story that I'm reading in the January 6th report. So clearly the report reported on it. Otherwise, I wouldn't know about it because I'm not telling you I'm not telling you this information based on the news reports coming out, on a daily basis, near daily basis. I am telling you this based on purely the report, the January 6th report. So I still don't understand where people have complaints about what the report left out. I understand some people's critiques on uh, the report not including a lot of details that it could have, as it pertained to law enforcement failures and media failures and phone calls between, uh, members of Congress and the White House and other people. This information is important and relevant from a legal standpoint, and I believe that the American people had the right to know. But the committee chose not to include that in their report, but they opened the gates for people to ask those questions. And for great people like Denver Riggleman and reporters like Ryan J. Riley, they have reported on these more specifically, and we should pay attention to their stories and their books and their day-to-day reporting. So, without further ado, I am going to start today by the last appendix of the January 6th report, which is Russian influence. So if you're new to my channel, please like and subscribe and press that bell notification, and let's get started. The January 6th report reads, in the wake of the 2020 US presidential election, Donald Trump and his apologists attempted to blame his laws on foreign interference. They falsely claimed that foreign manufactured voting machines had been manipulated so that votes cast for Trump were instead recorded as votes cast for Joe Biden. No one has ever, either at the time or since, offered any evidence to support Trump's assertion. On the contrary, ample evidence collected by the intelligence community and reviewed by the Select Committee disproves those claims. That is not to say foreign actors made no attempt to influence the American political climate during and after the 2020 presidential election. This appendix evaluates the role foreign influence played in the circumstances surrounding the insurrection. For its analytic purposes, the intelligence community defines election interference as a subset of election influence activities targeted at the technical aspects of the election, including voter registration, casting and counting ballots, or reporting results. That definition notes that election interference is a subset of election influence, which the intelligence community defines to include overt and covert efforts by foreign governments or actors acting as agents of or on behalf of foreign governments intended to affect directly or indirectly a US election, including candidates, political parties, voters, or their preferences or political processes. The intelligence community's assessment found no factual basis for any allegation of technical interferences with the 2020 US election. We have no indications that any foreign actor attempted to interfere in the 2020 US elections by altering any technical aspect of the voting process, including voter registration, ballot casting, vote tabulation, or reporting results. Put simply, allegations that foreign powers rigged voting machines and swapped ballots were false and unsupported. Although there is no evidence, sorry, I put the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable, as Mike Myers would say it. Although there's no evidence of foreign technical interference in the 2020 election, there is evidence of foreign influence. So understand the nuance here. I'm going off, I'm not quoting the report here, I'm just trying to explain what we just read, which is the difference between foreign interference versus foreign influence, right? I want to sort of briefly read that again. Interference is a subset of influence, okay? Influence is broader, right? And if you look at the definitions, if you go back and listen to the definitions again or read the definitions in your copy of the report, which you should have downloaded, by the way, then you would see the broad scope of influence versus the more narrow, specific, targeted scope of interference. Okay? Specifically, going back to the report here, specifically, the intelligence community's assessment concluded that Russian President Putin authorized and a range of Russian government organizations conducted influence operations aimed at denigrating President Biden's candidacy and the Democratic Party, supporting former President Trump, undermining public confidence in the electoral process, and exacerbating sociopolitical divisions in the United States. The two intelligence communities' analytic conclusions about the 2020 US presidential election, that there was evidence of foreign influence but not foreign interference, are completely consistent. Okay? So, as I mentioned briefly in the Kevin McCarthy video that I did a couple of days ago, it is Sergei Lavrov's taunting reply to the Western reporter about interfering in American elections. Can you prove it? And I would suspect that Russia is too much of a cowardly terrorist state to overtly interfere in American elections. Because I'd like to remind you that Russia has the economy of the state of Texas, okay? It's very big in size, but other than their massive oil reserves and a weapons military industrial complex, they really don't have anything else. So for them to interfere and targeted the scope of meddling in American elections on a physical level would be a step too far for Putin. And Putin is not that kind of a guy. He's a coward. He's a cowardly spy. Not spies aren't cowardly; they're very brave. But he's somebody who sits in a corner of his palace somewhere that nobody knows where he is and orders the killings of people. He doesn't. He's not on the field. He's like Stephen Miller of spies. So it kind of looks the same too. The two of them. I'm going back to the report again. The 2020 US elections saw an increase in the number of foreign state and non-state entities that attempted to influence the US electorate. The US intelligence community suggests, as a possible explanation, that more such foreign entities may view influence operations as important tools for projecting power abroad. More ascertainably, the growth of the internet and the social media use means foreign actors are more able to reach US audiences directly, while the tools for doing so are becoming more accessible. The United States' principal foreign adversaries, Russia, China, and Iran, all of them autocracies, engage to varying degrees in disguised efforts to influence American public opinion. In the context of these overarching efforts, US elections offer special opportunities. For Russia, elections often serve as an opportune target, but attacks on elections are typically just one part of ongoing multi-pronged operations. The US intelligence community's definitive post-election assessment of foreign influence activities during the 2020 presidential election concluded that Russia was deeply engaged in disinformation activities intended to influence the outcome by supporting President Trump while disparaging then candidate Biden. Iran also engaged in efforts to influence the election's outcome, but unlike Russia, did not actively promote any candidate. And that China considered opportunities to influence the election's outcome, but ultimately decided that potential costs outweighed any foreseeable benefits. Both Russia and Iran worked to undermine the American public's confidence in US democratic processes and to deepen sociopolitical divisions in the United States. I don't know how much more jarring that has to be for every American to hear. You are being influenced, and Russia lifted up Donald Trump and denigrated Joe Biden. Donald Trump, on a daily basis, attacks American foundations. Donald Trump incited an insurrection against the United States. Donald Trump committed seditious conspiracy against the United States. Donald Trump continues to advocate the overthrow of our government in various different ways. Donald Trump continues to incite violence and send out lone wolf attackers who believe in election lies like Solomon Pena and David DePape, and people who attacked FBI offices with nail guns, rammed into Capitol barricades right after the insurrection, and the threat of it continues. And that is the person that Russia lifted up and used their influence campaign to make president and then keep president of the United States. China knew better. They decided that it was against their best interest. But Russia led in influencing American people and spreading disinformation through social media. So I want Americans to pay attention to this and start taking responsibility for where you get your news. And for people like Steve Bannon and Alex Jones and Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham and Ben, I think his name is Ben Shapiro or something like that. These people, being Americans, are actively aiding and abetting the Russian influence to debilitate the United States. Whether they're doing it on their own volition or they're being swindled or coerced or paid into this, peddling these lies, or whether they're doing it purely because they hate America despite getting all the benefits of being American. Whatever the reason is, DOJ has an urgent responsibility to look into that. And the January 6th committee did make recommendations for truthfulness in media, whether that be social media or news media. Going back to the report, Russian malign disinformation efforts are both strategic in scope and opportunistic in nature. They aim to corrode the power and appeal of the US democratic processes, worsen US domestic divisions, and weaken America at home and abroad. The intelligence community's assessments. Foreign adversaries' influence campaigns routinely push disinformation to US audiences. Elections offer an important forum for Russia and other US adversaries to seek to deepen divisions within American society through disinformation campaigns. The intelligence community projects that both Russia and China will, for the foreseeable future, continue to press their disinformation campaigns, attempting to undermine the US population's confidence in their government and society. Russia certainly did so in the period following the election and preceding the January 6th attack. The disinformation spread by Russia and its messengers during that time was not, however, entirely original. The intelligence community's assessment found that Russia's disinformation engine borrowed President Trump's own words to achieve its goals. Now, this is very important. Whether Donald and Russia are working hand in hand or whether they were just at the right time, at the right place, we, the people on the street, know that it's the former and not the latter. We, the people on the street, know that there was that meeting in Helsinki. We know that Donald Trump chose Putin over our intelligence community. We know that Donald Trump, as early as last week, did the same thing by reasserting his position of choosing Putin's words over our intelligence community. It's in plain open and plain view. It's an insult and a slap in the face of every American who watches helplessly at this happening and realizes what's happening. And it is irresponsible of every other American who chooses not to see this as an imminent threat to our democracy. When our country's constitution was drafted and when our country started this great experiment, we didn't have the luxury of gladiatorial sports every night. We didn't have the luxury of the free market system. We didn't have the power of the dollar. People at the time were invested in knowing what was happening in politics because politics is about the people. It is about the body politic. It is what pertains to the well-being of the people on a day-to-day basis. It's tough questions. It's ugly work. And there's a lot of corruption. But that does not mean that every American citizen does not have the duty to partake in it, to watch over our Constitution, just as our Constitution vests to us fundamental rights that gives us the value that we feel in ourselves, that we are worth something, that we have rights, that we are equal, that we can go out and protest, that we have the rights of privacy, no matter how much eroded. We do have power of the due process of law. We have the right to trial. We have these rights. So when we so proudly say we have these rights, we should also be cognizant of the inherent responsibilities we have to safeguard those rights. And when Americans don't do that, we have what we have in America today, a dysfunctional House of Representatives and millions of people disinformed and influenced by foreign adversaries that seek to deepen the divisions within American society. We are killing ourselves with our apathy. We are killing ourselves with our selfishness. We are destroying our own republic, and they are just helping. Don't take that help. Do your due diligence. Going back to the report, the Russian online influence actors generally promoted former President Trump and his commentary, including repeating his political messaging on the election results, the presidential campaign, debates, the impeachment inquiry, and the election as the election neared US domestic crises. Indeed, President Trump's messaging during and after the 2020 election was reflected in Russian influence efforts at the time. In September of 2020, the Department of Homeland Security's Office of Intelligence and Analysis warned that Russia was engaged in pre-election activity targeting the US democratic process. The bulletin advised that Russia is likely to continue amplifying criticisms of vote by mail and shifting voting processes amidst the COVID-19 pandemic to undermine public trust in the electoral process. Okay? So the intelligence community warned that this was happening. But somehow it got lost in all of the news coming out. Way of concealing the foreign state origin was to use unattributable proxies. Foreign state adversaries of the United States generally disguise their efforts to influence US audiences, particularly when they seek to influence US voters' views in the run-up to an election. Among the many ways of concealing the foreign state origin or sponsorship of such a message is to use unattributable proxies, cutouts, or fully independent ideological allies in the United States as messaging organs. Tucker Carlson come to mind, anybody? A cooperative American messenger, a proxy for the foreign government itself, may be needed to make the foreign origin message congenial to the target American audience. There's so many names that keep coming up to my mind that fit this definition, you know. Tucker is just one of them. I named some of the other ones earlier. Malign foreign influencers, including foreign governments, used an additional such masking tool during the Trump administration, amplifying US originated messages so they reached a broader audience. Those influencers often took advantage of the algorithms by which social media platforms bring congenial messages and other information to users whose views are likely to be similar or compatible. So they were just, herding together people and building that flock online. They were influencing through proxies, through cutout, unattributable proxies, cooperative messengers, Shortly after the January 6th attack, the National Intelligence Council summarized the scope and significance of Russia's use of proxies in the 2020 US presidential election. A key element of Moscow's strategy this election cycle was its use of proxies linked to Russian intelligence to push influence narratives, including misleading or unsubstantiated allegations against President Biden to US media organizations, US officials, and prominent US individuals, including some close to former President Trump and his administration. The success of the proxy depends on shielding its foreign sponsorship. For that reason, it can be difficult or impossible to determine conclusively whether someone parroting a foreign government's adversary's point of view to a US audience is that government's controlled proxy or a volunteer taking full advantage of US First Amendment freedoms. It should, this is me, this is me saying this, it should infuriate every American that Russia and Iran are using our First Amendment rights against us. And they are able to do it because there are so many people who choose not to learn. There are so many people who don't value education, who have been generationally isolated and inundated by the Republican Party. Some of the people are waking up in that cohort, and I hope more of them do. But the Republican Party has caused this. And you ask why white uh, Christianity, nationalist Christianity is a part of it, why evangelical Christianity is a part of it, because people predisposed to blind faith are predisposed to brainwashing and inundation. They are more susceptible to being swindled. That is why an education is necessary, to have a free society. Otherwise, our adversaries use our fundamental rights against us because we don't make good use of them. And it's a sad commentary on American society and what Americans need to do to change that. With Trump in the White House, Russia benefited from a powerful American messenger creating and spreading damaging disinformation it could amplify. The intelligence community's comprehensive March 2021 assessment noted that throughout the 2020 federal election cycle, Russian online influence actors generally promoted former President Trump and his commentary. Trump's relentless propagation of the big lie damaged American democracy from within and made it more vulnerable to attacks from abroad. His actions did not go unnoticed by America's adversaries, who seized on the opportunity to damage the United States. According to the intelligence community's March 2021 assessment, even after the election, Russian online influence actors continued to promote narratives questioning the election results. What President Trump was saying was, in sum, exactly what the Russian government wanted said, but he was doing it on his own initiative and from the trappings of the Oval Office. Success of the proxy depends on shielding its foreign sponsorship. And it's difficult and impossible to determine if someone parroting a foreign government adversary's point of view to a US audience is proxy or a volunteer taking full advantage of our First Amendment freedoms. So that is the resounding message of the January 6th committee report. The January 6th committee report does an excellent job of breaking down our responsibilities as Americans. It is up to us. And even if I inform just one person today, that is increasing the number of people who know the truth. When you are online, you have a responsibility to cross-check everything that you post and repost, that you tweet and retweet. You have a responsibility to go out and check for yourself what people like me, or even people who you deem to be more credible, are saying on social media and on news media. You need to double check. You need to learn the truth. You need to know the opposing argument. You don't any longer have the luxury of blocking out that argument, because that argument by people like Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham and Steve Bannon and Alex Jones, these people, you need to know their arguments. You need to know where they're coming from. Then you need to see who on social media keeps peddling them. And instead of amplifying them further, you need to notify everybody else that this is happening. And there's a very interesting character, and I follow him on Twitter, Ron Flipkowski. And he, dedicates all his time to posting clips of these deranged, anti-American, anti-patriotic, anarchist elements in our society that seek every day to undermine American confidence in American democracy. And I have to say, sometimes I get irritated by it because I have to see these mugs. But if we don't learn their arguments, if we don't see where these channels are that the information is turning into disinformation, if we don't catch them the minute we see them and present it and effectively, dispel the lie right there, catch them in their act and cut it down right there, it will spread. And that spread will cause what we had on January 6, 2021 to look like a cakewalk. Today, we have Donald Trump running for re-election again. And Molly Jong Fast is another tweeter and a reporter for Vanity Fair who wrote an excellent article about how we must not normalize that. We cannot talk about Donald Trump like any other presidential campaign in running in a presidential election. He is a seditionist. He committed seditious conspiracy against the United States, and he incited an insurrection. He advocated overthrow of our government, and he continues to do so. And he is not only ineligible to be president of the United States, he's entirely unfit. And even after being president for 4 terms, being as disastrous as he is, he doesn't have what it takes to be a leader. If Donald Trump is normalized, if his campaign is talked about as just another presidential campaign, it will again feed in to foreign influence campaigns from Russia and Iran. And if we make it this easy for these foreign adversaries, then China will chime in as well. And God knows what other country will. So if Americans don't pay attention to our democracy, this is what will happen. You're going to get your Social Security taken away. You're going to get taxed 30%. You're going to be told what to teach your kids. you're not going to be able to have privacy. Police will beat you on the streets and there will be no consequences. You may or may not get a fair trial. Most likely won't. You will start working twice as hard and getting paid half as much, while the people who are sycophants will keep getting richer and richer. And then there's going to come a time when Donald Trump and his allies will order the removal from society of all the people who don't fit their narrative. We saw this happening with Hitler in Germany. Germany was an extremely open and liberal society before the Nazi Party took over. It can happen to the United States. But what will be different for Americans and the world is that America today is not Germany. America is the global stabilizer. If America is compromised, NATO will go away. Global cooperations will change. The face of Europe will change. American rights will go away. And there will be a dystopia that descends on the world. The dollar won't mean anything. And standing in line at soup kitchens will become the new normal. That's what Putin wants America to become. And if Americans help him, like Donald Trump is, like Tucker Carlson is, like Laura Ingraham is, like Alex Jones is, like Steve Bannon is, and if people don't pay attention to these subversive acts on a daily basis and call them out, and then shut them down right there, be done with it. And call for them to be removed from the public airwaves for being subversive to the American democratic process, then Russia and China and Iran will take advantage of these situations. And we will be in decline decisively. We're not there yet. We're on the precipice. So, Zoila and Deb, thank you so much for being here. This will be the last January 6th report review because I am done with reviewing the January 6th report. It has culminated in, I think it's 11 parts for the appendices, 11 videos, and 20 videos for the substantive report, and then one episode for the recommendation. So that's how much is that? 20 plus 11, 31, 32 episodes. I'll probably not be coming on a daily basis from now on. I will probably come on when major news drops. As it stands now, there is possibility of indictment from Fani Willis from the Fulton County with Donald Trump's name on it. Tom Fitton was subpoenaed by Jack Smith to ask why he kept pushing Donald to declare victory before the 2020 elections were called. I would suspect that there are others who Jack Smith will subpoena or has already subpoenaed. I don't see how Mark Meadows is not indicted if he does not cooperate. If he cooperates, he would have a immunity agreement, and that would be the end of Donald Trump. And that this is all speculation. Same thing goes for John Eastman. If John Eastman and Mark Meadows can be flipped by the DOJ successfully, then Donald Trump will be indicted sooner rather than later. But the question is, how much longer do we have to wait? And I don't envy Jack Smith, and I don't particularly like the deliberative and glacial pace at which DOJ is working. But I will never ever say that the DOJ is not doing anything, because the DOJ has 2 seditious conspiracy convictions under its belt, and over nearly 1,000, if not over already, guilty pleas or convictions related to the January 6th insurrection. In the last 2 years, not complete 2 years yet, that's a lot of work done. Mind you, the DOJ has to look at other things as well. And this debt ceiling crisis, if the House stalls, keeping our government open and our government has to shut down, that would affect DOJ's investigations as well, because the funding would be stopped there as well, because it's part of the federal government. So there's another incentive for, um, McCarthy and Jim Jordan and Scott Perry to double down on this debt ceiling nonsense. The Republican Party is playing as an unattributable proxy of the Russian government at this time. Make no mistake. Today's Republican Party is an unattributable proxy of Vladimir Putin. Many of the reporters of Fox News are unattributable proxies of the Russian government. Don't forget that. Keep repeating that. Go to your copy of the report, copy and paste that onto your Twitter feed and social media feed, and keep saying it. The January 6th report gives you the information. Use it to keep our republic. All right? Thank you, Deb. Thank you, Zoila. I will see y'all when I see y'all.